Have any of you successfully identified a person from a missing persons poster billboard, resulting in their safe return home? If so, please tell us your story. I've told this story before on here, but I'll tell it again. I was one of those missing children on the posters. I was taken from my dad by my mom after an ugly divorce battle. I was missing for about 3 years. The only reason I was found was the principal at the school my mom put me in saw my poster. He reported it to the police and I was returned to my dad. Of course there is much more to this story, but the point I like getting across is, although these posters aren't the most effective most of the time, the few times they work, it's a person's life that's being saved. No, my mom would not have killed me, but she was on drugs and a severe alcoholic and put me into many horrible situations as a 4-year-old. A severely autistic boy went missing near my township. Major city. I saw it on the news at lunch and realized it was near my house. Well, they went as far as having a manhunt because they found some of his clothes in the woods a few miles from his house and it was sleeting at this point. By the time I got home that evening he had been missing for 36 hours and they were very concerned he would freeze to death. Once home I realized someone had tried to break into my house. So naturally I started to investigate around the house. Finally went out to the barn and found a dog chain tied to the mower inside the barn. My roommate went to get a flashlight because it was so dark. I just assumed that some kids were being kids and tied the mower up as a prank. That's when we heard a noise and like something out of a movie we pan up with the light and that missing kid is sighting 2 feet from us in the pitch blackness of the barn, soaking wet and stark naked. Needless to say we both screamed like girls. Needless to say I recognized him and called 911. I guess he was on the verge of death from hypothermia. Apparently he used the mower to lock himself in the barn and he had in fact been breaking into the house multiple times. He had an entire case of muscle milk, 2 pizzas, peanut butter, jelly, loaf of bread, potato salad, crackers, 5-gallon jug of Culligan water, pillows from my bed, cloths from my roommate's room and some other random crap. We were interviewed by every major news network around. It was the most bizarre night of my life. To top things off, my GF calls me the next day and tears laughing and says, "I didn't realize you were dating someone else." I was confused and asked what she was talking about. She says, "Just watched your interview on Fox and they kept referring to you as the couple that rescued the local lost child. Apparently if you are in your late 20s or older and have a roommate that is not a woman, people assume you're gay, haha. TLDR rescued found a missing child in my mini barn. He almost died from hypothermia. He also broke into my house and stole a ton of crap. Apparently you have to tell the news your sexual orientation otherwise they just guess." Apparently you have to tell the news your sexual orientation otherwise they just guess. This is what made me go back and read your story. In high school I was friends with a very sweet girl who was in a few classes with me. We tried to hang out after school, even have her meet friends at a school dance. This was the 80s, folks, and her father absolutely refused to let her go anywhere ever. Outside of school she was on total lockdown. It was very sad, but I just assumed he was a religious zealot or something. So one day I go to English class and she's gone. For days, then weeks. Turned out that a classmate of mine had seen a much younger photo of her in her mom's magazine on a page of missing children. She very quietly brought it to school and if this was her, it was. The school and police snapped into action. Turns out she had been stolen by her father, probably a custody case, and was eventually returned to her mother after years of not knowing why she couldn't see her mother or go anywhere. So there you have it, a child returned safely from having her missing persons photo in a magazine. I am an IQ nurse and got a very interesting patient one day. She had been running in midday 100+ June heat in Houston and had suffered a massive stroke. It was unclear how long she had been unconscious before she was found. On her person was only a house key safety pinned in her sock. Many of my co-workers assumed she was homeless, but I knew immediately that couldn't be true. She had gorgeous flawless skin and amazing dreadlocks. Not matted messy dreads but lovely long cared for dreadies as well as some pretty gorgeous ink. Plus I don't know too many homeless people who run regularly. As days turned into weeks it became obvious my Jane Doe was dying. She had uttered only one sound when she was found originally before never waking again. Stevenson. My opinion was that must be her name. The thing is privacy laws, HIPAA, Had my hands tied. Finding her family before he died would be difficult. So I put my nursing license on the line and called the local police and described my beautiful Jane Doe. No reports matched her. The next day I guess the cop I spoke to was haunted as well by this quest to identify a dying woman and sent me a picture of a missing woman who was reported later that day after I had called. It was my Jane Doe. I called administration and they weren't sure, but they thought it might still be against HIPAA to identify her. Screw a nursing license. If HIPAA meant I couldn't reunite a dying woman with her family, then I didn't care to follow it. I positively ID'd her and her family came. All she had was her son and ex-husband. Her son had been at football camp for a month and returned to no one waiting for his bus. No mom at home. His name was Stephen. She wasn't saying Stevenson. She was saying my son, Stephen. She died 2 days later. As it turned out, she was a devout Buddhist and the day she died, monks in orange robes carried her body out. Stephen thanked me for giving him the chance to say goodbye. I wasn't fired or even yelled at : My friend locked his brother in the closet and forgot he was in there, and he was reported missing for 10 hours until he remembered again. How do you forget that? When I was little, my family and I were at the beach when one of those announcements came on about a missing girl. We decided to take a walk down the beach and sure enough we find the little girl playing in the sand, so we bring her to the Lifeguard station. Turns out her name was Treasure. My mom never gets sick of telling people we found Treasure on the beach. We lost our 3-year-old daughter at Gatorland, Florida. There may be worse places to lose a small child, but this was pretty stressful. Thankfully the staff put out an immediate APB and we found her again shortly afterwards. She had all her limbs. Sometime around Christmas last year my friend and I got baked quite nice and wanted to go downtown for some among the people laughs. Since it was freezing outside and the rain was pouring heavily, we decided to take a tram. We just started kicking in and our laughter became more and more uncontrollable. Suddenly I noticed a huge old lady sitting next to us, eyeballing us head to toes. Her gigantic size combined with her fairy-like clothes and the fact that she had surfing sunglasses on at 9 PM just topped it all. At first we didn't notice, but then a faint smell of feces mixed with moisture and old people smell started invading nostrils of all the passengers. After a while it became obvious it was her. It became unbearable, so we went outside on the next stop and continued our journey on foot. Somehow, she stuck in my brain. Unlike most things while I'm high. Tomorrow morning, on my way to work I noticed a missing person sign on the pole. Got a little closer and realized it's the same old huge smelly lady we saw yesterday, and who made our night, in a way. I immediately called the number below. As it turned out, she was 78 had Alzheimer's, was delusional and also missing for the last 2 months. Also, she disappeared 200 kilometers away from the city I live in. Nobody knows how she got here nor how she managed to survive on her own during those times in a condition she was in. Her family told me she's not capable of taking care of herself. A week later I got a call back from the person I called. It was her son, saying that they'd found her, got her home and wanted to thank me for steering the search party in the right direction. He also told me they never found out what she was doing for those 2 months, due to her Alzheimer's. All in all, a strange week. I'd say a strange 2 months for the lady. Day 62. My cover has been blown. Can't say I've ever successfully returned a missing person, but I have had someone return me. When I was younger I got separated from my dad at the subway station. Police were called. Many descriptive PA system announcements were made about me in different locations, and a kind lady eventually returned a sobbing lost girl to the right people. My uncle must have some dang good vision. As he was driving by a liquor store he saw a car pulling out and caught a glimpse of a girl in the back. Apparently he recognized her from Crime Stoppers or something like that. He called the police and tailed the guy and sure enough it was her. Might be an article on it, long time ago though, so maybe not. If I can find it I certainly will forget and not deliver. Maybe I'll ask him about it as well. The missing person I found was based off of a description rather than a poster. It was actually a haunting experience. I found a 14-year-old girl after she had gone missing earlier that day. I used to be an ocean lifeguard on the East Coast. Based on the details in this story you can easily piece together where but please don't. When I got into work one morning, we were told a 14-year-old girl had gone missing at 5:30 a.m. that morning. She had been running with her dad on the beach but decided to keep going and never came home. We were given her description, told to keep an eye out and sent to our stands. She had gone missing 15 miles north of my beach. We operated on a policy of 45 minutes on the stand, 15 minutes off the stand. Since we were all college athletes, we would take our 15 minutes off per hour back to back, bending the rules, I know, to give us enough time to get a workout in. I played soccer in college, so I used these 30-minute breaks to get 4 or 5 mile runs in. South of my beach was technically a national park. It was totally devoid of people, and was awesome for running through. Deserted beach all to yourself rules. On this particular day, I took off for my run around 4 p.m. Like 10 plus hours or so after the girl had gone missing. The park was empty as usual. When I got to the 2-mile marker where I usually turn around, I saw a person in the distance, which was unusual, and decided to keep going. I guessed it was a park ranger, and since lifeguarding can be boring as crap, it's nice to get a conversation in every now and then. In any case, I kept running, and when I got to the person, it was a 14-year-old girl. This is where it gets kinda fricked up. First of all, she was sunburned as a mother, just absolutely destroyed. Second of all, her clothes did not match the description we were given. I don't remember exactly what we were told she was wearing, but it definitely was not a pair of spandex shorts and an old dirty shirt way too big for her, and no shoes. I asked her what her name was, and it was the girl who had gone missing. I don't really remember what I said to her while we were walking back to my beach. I just remember her silently walking while I talked. I also remember feeling physically cold. I dunno. I was just cold, even though it was freaking hot as crap in the middle of the summer. I walked her back to my beach, left her with my beach lieutenant, a super nice early 30s school teacher, and went back to my stand. I was never given any detail on what actually happened after that. My beach LT claimed she was never given any info, and I wasn't about to pry. My best guess is that someone picked her up in the early morning hours on the beach and ended up dumping her in the park south of us. I was just the first person to run into her while she was trying to walk back to civilization. Crap sucked. I'm working on it, but sort of in a reverse way. My county's Department of Coroner lists their unidentified people in a database on their website. I'm currently investigating a 12-year-old case and I'm making good progress. There's no face and no name. She was burned beyond recognition and never identified. She has to be missing somewhere. One time at the beach, I decided to play hide and seek with my grandma without telling her. Turns out my hiding spot ruled, cause she totally called the cops to look for me. This will probably get buried at this point, but when I was in middle school, my mom recognized 2 of the kids who lived next door to us from one of those missing mailers that came once a week with some coupons. About a year before, our neighbors had gotten involved in some strange religious cult type organization, and there had been a number of different people living with them for some time. There were a couple of kids a little younger than me that had been living there with, I believe, their dad for some time, and we'd see them sometimes in the yard and talk to them. My mom saw one of the mailers one day and swore that they were the same kids, called the FBI hotline, and eventually they came and checked it out. If I recall correctly, the kids had been kidnapped from their mom by their dad. This was 20 plus years ago now, don't remember for sure, to join this cult, and the house next door was a branch of it. Last week I found a dog collapsed and shivering in the snow late at night in town. I pulled over and checked its tags and called the owner, who happened to live a couple of towns over. The dog had wandered 4 miles through the woods and had finally came to rest at the bottom of my street. My car was completely full of crap, so I picked up the dog and put it on the passenger seat and drove it to their house. You saved Christmas. I met a chef while working at a restaurant in South Africa a few years ago. He had fled gambling debt in Germany, leaving his wife and mother behind without telling anyone, to essentially kill himself by partying too hard in what he figured to be a remote corner of the world. I of course didn't know any of this until his face and name popped up on a missing persons bulletin after the news one afternoon. I asked him about it and he broke down in tears and told me the story. His mother had tracked him down to having entered South Africa and had put the call into the police as a missing person. He contacted her and flew her out for a holiday. Don't know what happened to his wife, but I know he is now remarried and back in Germany. I work in a casino here in Germany, part-time job. It's pretty unbelievable how addicted some people are to gambling even when they know that they will definitely lose money on the long run. And in most of German casinos you can buy most of the common drugs. So for some people these are double loss places. Sad stories. In high school I worked at a grocery store as loss prevention. There was recently a kidnapping of an 8-year-old from the school after class and I was told to watch for her as the suspect was a regular. I think it was her dad who didn't have custody if I remember right. Well, he walked in with a stroller which was abnormal in the first place. Then the kid's face flashed at a camera and it was obvious she was too old for a stroller and she was passed out. I called the police and notified them of what I saw. There was a cop there with 2 minutes and it was her. He had given her a drug that made her pass out so she wouldn't say anything to anyone while he was there. Not really. However, about 3 years ago, I walked into a turnpike rest stop and stopped dead in my tracks to see a girl I knew on one. She tried really hard to steal my boyfriend's senior year, but all in all we became friends. Anyway, my dad ran right into me because of my sudden stop. I showed him the picture and he laughed, thinking I was mistaken. There goes SLS 36. Being a drama queen. I called my friend and asked her about it. Turns out she ran away to NYC and never returned. She seems happy now. My sis flew up to NYC for a 1-week vacation when she was 16, turning 30 this year. She still lives there. I worked at a Walmart for a short time. One day, as I'm walking back to lunch break they call a code Adam, I think, and give a description of a missing child. So they close the doors, per procedure, until the kid can be found. Right then, with impeccable timing, this little dude sporting a perfect little kid bowl cut and full Spider-Man get up, jumps out of a clothes rack and pretends to shoot me with a web. I start laughing harder than I ever have laughed in public and tell him his mom is looking for him. He just shoots me with web again and takes off running towards the front of the store where a manager spots him. Made my friggin' day. I found my own dog without knowing it was missing once. Driving home from school, see dog on road, pull over and know for sure but double check collar tag anyway. That's my dog. Drive home, find that my mom accidentally let him out without knowing. You must have a popular breed. My story is not as happy but it was closure. I came home late from a Halloween party only to find a cat just run over by a car. The car had crushed its poor little skull and it died instantly. The butthole that ran over him did not stop so I picked the cat off the road and put him on some grass so he would be found. I was a little drunk and had a plane to catch the next morning. Get on plane and fly to LA for 10 days. Get back home only to see a lost cat poster on every pole up and down my street. So I had to call her and tell her. She screamed at me and told me I was wrong. Her cat was too smart. So I'll let her deal with the shock, then told her he had died instantly and did not suffer. Eventually she came to realize the truth and angrily said goodbye. Then I was left to cry by myself because now I knew that dead cat had a loving home and he was greatly missed. On behalf of the emotionally distraught owner, my apologies for screaming at you. It was not deserved and completely out of line. Long story, but yes, they work. When I was a bartender, a detective walked into my bar during the evening shift and showed me a picture of a guy they were looking for. I looked and didn't know the guy, but he asked if he could put it in the window. Said the guy was missing and sick. So I said sure. That night, I noticed a couple of guys were talking and kept getting up and looking at the picture in the window very cautiously. After seeing them do it a third time, I walked up to them and asked if they happened to know something. They turned out to be 3 Portuguese guys who didn't speak much English. They were very quiet and looked like they were contemplating saying something. I pushed the issue a little farther and said that if they know something but want to remain discreet, they can use the bar phone to make a call. No sooner had the words left my mouth did the shortest guy get up, grab the flyer and go to the phone. After about 5 minutes on the phone, they all got up and left. I had even forgotten to charge them for their drinks. About 2-3 hours later, the detective came into the bar looking for me. He wanted to say thanks, It turned out that the guys that were in the bar had called the number on the flyer and said they had seen the guy. The person on the other end didn't speak Portuguese or Spanish though, so instead of waiting, the guys left the bar, picked up a friend who can translate and brought them to the police station. They told the police that the guy had come to their job and was not looking well, acting very strange and looked like he needed help. So they helped him by bringing him to a hospital. They didn't know there was a hospital just a mile away, which is where the police were looking. So they brought him to a hospital that they knew which was about 10 miles away, and because of a miscommunication, the guy ended up getting checked and under one of their names. They were hesitant to say anything because they were in the country illegally. People risking deportation to help out a stranger. Good guy illegals. When I was 9, I witnessed a kid being kidnapped. I was walking to friend's house to play chess and I saw an adult male grab a kid and the kid was screaming. He called out, "Help me, no, help." I ran to my friend's home and was totally terrified. I told his mother to call the police. The cops arrived and I pointed out the unit the man took the boy into. They banged on the door, guns drawn. Turns out the boy was his son, and they were just playing around. I felt totally stupid, but the man and boy did thank me for calling the police. I'd have thanked you, too. Too many people would have gone. Not my problem. I don't want to get involved. Sounds too messy. When I was around 8 years old, a new girl in the neighborhood started coming around and playing with my brother and I. One day my mom made us all lunch and thought the girl looked familiar. Turns out she had seen her picture on either a milk carton or at the post office. I can't remember which, and she called the cops. Turned out the girl's father had kidnapped her from her mom in Texas and took her to NJ. Not a missing person, but I saw my neighbor's dog randomly walking on some random road once. I brought it back to their house. Not much to tell. This isn't national news, but I hold the record for finding the most missing campers in a summer at the camp I worked at. I found 9 different campers that summer. This'll likely get buried, but oh well. This wasn't from a missing person billboard, but it's along the same lines. A couple of years ago it snowed pretty hard in Portland, or it was a freak snowstorm that wasn't predicted by any of the weathermen in the city. I was on my way back to the city from a trip to the coast when I got caught in the storm. My little Honda Civic couldn't handle the snow without chains, so eventually I ran off the road. Just as I got into the city and started to walk the 4 miles I had left to get home. About halfway home, I stopped at a local supermarket, Fred Meyer for you Pacific Northwesterners, and called my dad, who decided to come pick me up. I'm far into adulthood, and dad still comes to the rescue. As I waited, I watched an older woman try to make several calls on the payphone next to my bench. She wasn't having any luck, so I got up and offered to help. She fumbled through her wallet and produced a card for one of the local adult care facilities for the mentally handicapped. State sponsored. She had basically missed the group home bus back to her home and was stuck there. I called the number on her card and the man that answered was rather callous in my opinion. He basically said that if she missed the bus, she was out of luck. She was going to have to take a taxi. Well, thanks to the snowstorm, a taxi was out of the question. The few that were running had more than a 4-hour wait. By the time that my dad arrived at the store, they had been closed for about 10 minutes and I had been waiting out in the cold with this woman. Anyhow, we got an address for the group home off of her card, and after a little exploration of the hills of southwest Portland, we were able to find her home and drop her off. When I knocked on the door, the worker at the home just said, "Oh, you made it." I was pretty frustrated that the worker at her group home was so indifferent, but glad nonetheless that she got home. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.